And welcome back, everyone, to the Triple O Show, one-on-one with Nate and Aziz. We were talking about some of our surprises of the season on the previous episode. Now we're going to discuss some of our disappointments.
Yeah.
So who's disappointed?
Do we need to hug each other before we get into this?
I don't even.
Look, man. Okay, so obviously one of the bigger stories for me this summer was the acquisition of Jabari Parker to the Chicago Bulls. Oh, let's just get that
hitting close to home right now.
Yes, the fans will get to know my disdain. Okay. Now, my expectation, just dating back to, all of the time I've watched Jabari over the course of his career, obviously there came some injuries, and based on his circumstance, things weren't playing out as we may have expected at that point. My thinking was coming into this season relatively injury-free, still working through a little bit of tweaks, but having a kind of a full set of legs beneath you. This is your opportunity. This is your stage. This is the moment where you need to let other NBA teams know, I'm a contract guy. I need to be paid. And so what he's done thus far, he's averaged, I believe, about 17 points over the last 3 games, which, in my mind, I'll accept that. But it is his defensive flaws. The guy is just clueless on the defensive end.
But you knew this going into the season.
Sure. And look, I expected some other guys maybe to cover up those shortcomings, but it's just very apparent when he's on the floor that there's a huge defensive mismatch. I was watching a game against Boston. Was it against Boston? It was either against Boston or Golden State. I tried to remove that Golden State game because they set some records on us.
That didn't happen.
Yeah. They put every player on the floor. They switched Jabari onto every different player on the floor, and he was just getting wrecked across the board. And so if he can't bring up his defensive capabilities over the course of the season, his minutes aren't going to stay strong. There's some other guys that can bring some scoring to the game, and they're much more defensively sound. So he's going to be my number one disappointment unless I just see a massive turnaround.
All right. Well, it's getting paid $20 million a year, so
I don't. Meanwhile, I'm more trying to. Oh my god. Okay, I'm not.
All right.
Don't get me worked up.
Okay, so we'll move on to the next topic. Since you're kind of going one that's a little not the obvious. I don't know why I try to believe in them every year, because the talent's there on 2K. They look like they have a great team, but the Washington Wizards, man, what is going on over there?
It's over. It's well over. Dwight, you're now the face of the team. Skinny Dwight, by the way. That man is.
Oh yeah, he's awesome.
Yeah, him and DeAndre Jordan have looked considerably leaner this season.
Or is the jersey just smaller?
Maybe the hair's getting bigger. The hair's getting longer. I don't know. I think it has 1,000% to do with the chemistry. Because you're absolutely right. There's too much talent on that team, and I wouldn't say it's chemistry like Oklahoma City back in the day, where you had Russell, KD, and Harden, where there is some competitive. Those guys are much more ego-driven in the sense of, I'm gonna tell you like it is and show you like it is. Or in Washington, I just feel like there's a lot of subtle animosity.
Yeah. Everyone's pointing the finger at everyone but themselves. Right.
And I'm gonna throw this quote out there. I could not confirm if this was real, but you may have seen this, that John Wall said Harry Potter is the only wizard that could help this team. He ended it by saying, "We're ass."
That sounds about right.
I don't know if that's true, but John, I get your pain, man. What's the solution?
So I feel like you gotta trade Wall or Bill, but I don't know like who you can bring in that would be better. Like another situation is that I think like Kemba Walker, like he needs to leave the Hornets, but it's like where can he go? What team has the salary or the necessary assets to trade for him that would put him in a better position than where he is now? So the same thing with the Wizards. It's like, yes, we know the Wall and Beal dynamic doesn't work, but who are you gonna? What are you? You know, who you're gonna bring in?
There's not much you can do right now.
Right, and then in addition to that, Otto Porter's on a huge contract, and he's been underperforming. Kelly Oubre has outplayed him by a long shot this year. So I don't expect a guy like Otto Porter to be there. But once again, a guy with that kind of contract, unless you know what? I'm calling it now. Washington got to go full rebuild. Like it's.
I think they could go the route of the Atlanta Hawks as we did several years ago when we just started moving some guys around. Because you do have to get them off the books. You're absolutely right.
Everyone's making too much money. You got to go full rebuild.
And that's really the give and take. Is you can strategize as much as you want, but what can you actually put forth? And you know, with Beal, it still feels like Beal is the most tradable piece. I don't know if guys are as willing to give. You know, I love John Wall, but I don't know what John Wall actually brings to my organization. I do know what Bradley Beal brings.
Sorry about that.
We got some dog toys on the floor here. So I feel like he's a bit more of an easy component to bring into an existing system.
Teams are more willing to trade for a Beal than a Wall, but I think that's part of the issue as well, because knowing that the organization, as for the Wizards, would rather keep Beal over Wall because of that same sentiment.
There's a lot of uncertainty there. And those guys, one thing that's really concerning me is that they're still young players, but they're not getting younger. That their value as top tier players could, in a backcourt, could begin to dwindle. And if that doesn't change soon, then everybody's screwed up, right? The organization's going to be done, and they're going to have to blow that up. So,
trade everybody. Get Oubre on the floor. Right-handed.
Oubre's played well. You
got Oubre, right-handed Oubre, Devin Robinson, and Troy Brown. So get these young guys out there, because they started the season 2-9. I'm sorry.
And I wouldn't expect them to have a playoff run.
It is,
but
the
be
East.
competitive. It's the East, man. I like to look at some teams that just have slow starts. So we look, we were talking about Houston some weeks ago, OKC. I'll give you the benefit of the doubt. It's an adjustment period. It's a schedule, but if the expectations were heightened last year, they should stay there.
Right.
I think about the Phoenix Suns. All right, you bring in your number one rookie. You have a guy that says, "This is my last year not making the playoffs." Your star player. I haven't seen that in motion. I'm giving you your first 12, 15, 20 games, but where's the drive?
Right.
Like, that's really what I'm not seeing from a lot of young teams is they don't think they can win, and they don't go out there acting like they can win.
You see, the talk is there, but the tone is different. I don't even want to talk about that. Suns lost to the Celtics the other night. Oh my goodness! Shout out my guy TJ Warren though.
TJ plays, man. TJ plays.
I love TJ Warren, but to your point, like you said, you've got teams that've got talent, a la Suns, Wizards, and the talk is there. Oh, we want to do this, we want to do that. But then when they show up on the court, maybe one or two players you see it, but for the most part, like, altogether, it's just not there. Whereas I think of a team like Brooklyn. Brooklyn is probably in the bottom 10 when it comes to talent, but they play hard every night.
They have two guys that have just taken a huge lead. I don't know. And again, that kind of goes back to what I was asking about Trier is, how do you shift the dial? All right, how do you go from start to finish? Is it you're enabled by your coach and your situation, or are you going out there yourself and saying, this is what I need to do? Karis LeVert, look, he's talented, but I feel like he just now knows in his mind, this is my team.
Yeah.
Or I'm going to finish games.
He's given an opportunity now.
Exactly.
And to your point, I think at that point, because like I said, everyone in the NBA is talented. It comes down to coaching and management, because management is the one making a decision about what players they're putting together. Because you can't you can have the most talented players in the world, but if they don't want to play together, it doesn't mean anything. So once you have those players in order, then it comes down to the coaching. Are you, like we were talking about Milwaukee earlier, are you putting the group of players that you have together in the most ideal position for them to succeed? Are you getting the most out of each player? And it just seems like those teams aren't doing that. They're just kind of throwing those guys out there.
Yeah.
Or they're giving them a system that doesn't work for them, and they're too, I don't know if the word is ignorant, but to adjust the system to realize that it's not working. They're feeling like, oh, well, eventually it's going to work. It's like, no.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a two-way street. And a development plan comes with, like you said, that comes from top-down strategization. That's not just a matter of what the coach wants to execute.
Yeah.
Because there's some long-term to that. You look at Philly and the scope and scale of what they wanted to put together on the floor. It does take some understanding across the board. And what I think it would be so disheartening as a player is if I feel like I'm just being pushed further and further away from that.
Yeah.
So it's good to see guys still being given, certain opportunities and stepping up to big moments. Brooklyn, hey, well, is that LeVert's team? Is that?
I think they're just a team.
Yeah, they're just a squad.
Because any night, I think LeVert has definitely took the helm at the beginning of the season, but any night a guy like D'Angelo Russell could show up. Allen Crabbe. Defensively, Jared Allen has been really well this year. So I think, but that's one of the good things is that you have a team that starts off where no one is the alpha dog or the leader, but as the season goes on, being in a position of winning games or being more competitive in games, you'll see players emerge.
Yeah, absolutely. We speak to Boston of their playoff run last year. That's exactly what happened.
So let's talk about the elephant in the room, Houston, who lost to Brooklyn. No, my bad. They beat Brooklyn. That was one. They beat Brooklyn in Chicago. So
I won't.
Whatever that means.
Look, man, Melo. We said Houston would be competitive. A lot of what we talked about in our preseason preview was giving Houston the benefit of the doubt that they could just stay as competitive as they were last year. They lost a couple guys, but bringing in such a top tier talent like Carmelo Anthony, you would think that would have stayed consistent. I'm not going to judge them just yet. Okay, Chris Paul he's also getting towards the end of the peak in his career. Really, I expected him to have one of the best playoff performances or runs of his career last season, which was, relative. He did okay.
He did. I think he played really well. Like,
but again, I expect the closer he gets to the end of his career, I don't see him slowing down. I see him just continuing to put everything out there on the floor. So that could come with, again, a heightened level of expectation or responsibility for Melo than what he's been given right now. I think Melo is just like the most chill, I just want to look good and play basketball type guy. And if it's not happening like that, he's not really going to put forth more effort to make that change.
He hasn't really adjusted. And to your point, I feel like I saw the same thing last year in Oklahoma City. He's more, I don't want to say he's stat driven, but it's clearly about him. It's like, I haven't shot the ball in a while. even if there's a hand in my face and, you know, the defender's closing out and it's not there, I'm going to get the shot up because I haven't shot it.
Yeah. He's an emotional guy with subtlety. It's like he plays in the flow of the game, and he can feel a certain way about what he's going to do on the floor. But if he's out of that headspace, he just feels he's like self-defeat.
Yeah. He shot 1 for 11 the other night against OKC.
Wow.
And the one shot wasn't even really a shot. It was a goaltend. So literally the ball did not go in the basket the entire game.
Why do you think he chose to go to Houston?
I think he felt like the situation was going to be the most ideal, because it turned out, as we saw, with OKC knowing that he wasn't going to work there, that they didn't want him, you know, to re-sign him. So, and the suitors weren't out there. So I think, you know, Chris Paul, James Harden just kind of figured, and especially with him being on the little veteran minimum contract.
Right, the contract isn't bad.
It was a situation where maybe it was mutual between him and Daryl Morey, where it's like, well, you're coming in on this amount of money. We know what you're capable of scoring and what we did last year in the regular season. So, you know, on paper, on the video games, it seems like a good fit. But as we've seen so far, the value of Trevor, I'm still, as I said, not sold on Mbah Moute being missed as much as they're claiming. But Trevor Ariza, for sure, the things that he brought to that team is being sorely missed at the moment.
Yeah, they just don't seem the same. Even though they've returned most of their guys, I don't see them even staying in the top 5 going into the playoffs this year. I still see them making a competitive run, but I don't know, and I think there will be some hard conversations that happen, particularly driven by Chris Paul, because again, I don't see Harden kind of demanding a heightened level of play or even the coach. So I don't know where that's going to come from unless Melo can motivate himself. Because again, he doesn't have much time either. You've kind of proven to this organization and any other potential teams that I'm still going to play the game. So
play the way I want to play.
Right.
I think the system just needs to change. I don't know what will work for them. And then as well, I think it's early in the season. Maybe you do need to get those younger guys some playing time on the floor. I mean, we've seen a guy like James Ennis get on the floor, Michael Carter-Williams, but guys
Carter Williams has had some good games.
He's there.
Eric Gordon, again, people are looking to call him up. So you may still see some trades potentially happening by the end of the year.
I think what they're realizing now is those secondary pieces don't fit well with Paul and Harden. So, your guys, like I said, like a Carter Williams, like an Ennis. I'm think they should try and get more playing time for. I'm not sure Brandon Knight is still injured, but Marquise Chris seems like with the type of players that they have now, he should be getting more run. I think they're going to have to go to a bigger lineup because they also have guys like Zoe and Isaiah Hartenstein, which I was impressed with both those guys in Summer League. They're both 7+ footers who move relatively well, not knockdown shooters, but in today's NBA, like we see like a guy like Brook Lopez, they can hit the three. So I think maybe you try, going with the ultra large lineups where you have a Paul Harden and then Hartenstein, Quee, and Capella or something like that. Because obviously, like we're saying with like Carter Williams, the shooting isn't there. So the other alternative is, hey, we've got length. So we're going to run with those guys. Let Paul and Harden get the shots and those other guys.
Yeah, rebound, play defense.
Right.
Yeah, that makes sense because I don't see them going away from the shooting. Why not just add to it? I don't know, man. I don't have much faith that they will turn around and meet their potential as, say, the Los Angeles Lakers, who, have played a pretty steady game. They haven't performed winning percentage-wise.
They've been competitive.
But they've been very competitive, and those guys know what they're trying to accomplish out on the floor. So I I think when we do our mid-season review, we'll probably be taking a look at how far they've continued to fall. We'll see.
What do you think about going to? I don't know if they're really disappointing, but Cleveland. And not to talk about Cleveland itself, but we know they're not where they thought they were going to be coming to the season, as far as losing LeBron and still thinking they were going to be competitive. But we know their focus now is getting those young guys on the court. So I think we're going to see teams start to inquire about guys like a Kyle Korver and a J.R. Smith. Do you think any one of those guys could help out a team like Houston?
Korver more so than JR because he just brings one thing and one thing only.
Excitement.
Yeah, some sweet hair gel. I don't know. You can keep adding shooting to Houston's offense, which would be fabulous, but it does have to happen on the other end of the court. So I'm trying to think of just a short list of guys who could make an immediate impact in Houston. And Jimmy was one of them prior to his trade, which we'll talk about in the next episode. I think they still had some room to come up with a conceivable trade for him.
Yeah.
But again, you're throwing all your chips in the bag, and if that doesn't work out, then you're screwed. So if I'm them, I'm still trying to be competitive this season. I'm still making some considerable moves because, this is the time. You're as close as being competitive to Golden State as you could be, so I wouldn't wait any longer.
Right. I think maybe a guy like Nick Batum would fit well with Houston. And his contract, I feel like, is at this point, I feel like it's in the same range as a Jimmy Butler, but that's Houston's not going to be offering 4 first-round picks for.
They're not going to do that. And Ariza, I can't recall what his deal was, but I see them kind of in the same lane.
Yeah.
In Batum, I haven't really kept a close eye on him in Charlotte. It's been the Kemba show for me, but based on he has a lot of offensive capabilities, but he is a two-way player, so not high demand. I'd make that consideration. It's just the cost, man. Everybody's on a budget these days.
For sure. I think Charlotte's. They need to move some pieces.
Yeah, they're also on that path.
That's another.
Not putting Miles Bridges in the driver's seat, bro.
Oh man, get free Dwayne Bacon.
All I see is Dwayne being hype on the bench, man. I'll give him that. You're still keeping some good vibes.
Oh man. Malik Monk shot. Just look at the box score from yesterday, man. Malik Monk was like 1 for 14 or something. But like you said, to your point, your opportunity, like if the coaches
could turn into 5 for 14 and then 8 for 14 the next game.
Right.
Because I'd much rather know that a guy went out there and he confidently took 14 shots versus he's on my bench and I don't know why he's on this team. There may be something I can evaluate during that game that we can change and make better. Right. So,
speaking of shots, so let's touch on this real quick before we wrap this up. Jokic,
yeah.
So they played Memphis. He took 1 shot, and that was in the last 3 minutes of the game. And then the next game, which was last night, they played Brooklyn. And he had 39. What? And they lost that game. They lost both games by 2.
Right.
So what does that mean to you?
Look, that game prior, that may have just been an anomaly. Jokic is I think he's a very deliberate guy. If he doesn't score that night, something to me is telling me he didn't want to score.
Scared of Marc Gasol?
I don't know. Maybe. But he was in my fantasy list for the start of the season. He'll continue to perform. If he has games like that, something is wrong.
You
I
think
didn't
he was
watch
trying
that
to
game.
prove a point that
No.
he didn't need to score and the team could still be competitive?
I don't think so. Because Denver does rely on his scoring. I think so. His inside presence is it doesn't get talked about a lot. But that'll only continue to be more of a conversation over the course of the season. He's a very dominant player.
He can be.
He can be. But in many ways, to your point, maybe he can also be a passive guy. Look, I'm not going to take one game or two games and say this is concerning. But, Denver, they played well. Jamal Murray, Gary Harris. I'm thinking about some Dragon Ball Z over here. Jamal Murray, also very confident guy. Gary Harris, very confident guy. They'll have a great season, so don't be concerned about any one or two shot games.
It says a lot to me, and I don't know, maybe partially because I've been having an ongoing debate with someone at the gym that thinks Jokic is better than Embiid, and I think this. Albeit a small sample size,
I won't say that.
It proves my point because I don't think you would ever see a Joel Embiid only take one shot in a game being, the type of... Because both of them, albeit they're different players, but they both impact the game, have ways they impact the game. So to me, knowing that Jokic could go a whole game without taking a shot or only taking one shot, and that being... at the buzzer at the end of the game says something to me about your mentality.
Right.
For you to be an upper echelon player and not be a point, because it's different. Like if you're a point guard, like I've had games, intramural games, rec league games where I haven't taken a shot and we've still won, but that's because of the kind of players I had around me and me being a guard knowing that, okay, I need to get these guys set up and I'll contribute otherwise. But being the post player, being a focal point of the offense, he's getting the ball at the free throw line elbow every game, and you're telling me you're not taking any shots. Mentally, that says something about you. So then to come back the next,
which is what?
I don't know, but so to come back the next game, because clearly he heard, maybe it was management, maybe it was coaching. He was like, I'm going to come back and shoot, which is fine and dandy. Like I'm impressed, but yes, you come out the next game. I think he had 39, 17, or 21 or something like that. But you lose both games by 2. So to me, that says that the points that you scored didn't really impact the game.
Yeah, but this is where I can't jump the gun because I look at a guy like Russell Westbrook where he may take 30 plus shots a game and the percentage is one thing and the impact is another. Because I'd much rather have a guy... Look, and I agree with you 100%. There's something deliberate. There's a headspace that drives his reason for not only taking one shot. Or not taking any shots. Because he might not have even taken that buzzer beater or whatever.
Right.
So, to me, that's an easier conversation to have of a guy who's shown some consistency. He's even shown some growth. He has a game like that. What's going on? But if it was a night in, night out, you're taking all these shots, you're missing all these shots, and then you just stop taking shots.
Right.
I can evaluate that in a different way. So maybe they've talked to him. Maybe he...
I mean, clearly they talked to him because he came out firing and he had offense, he had a good game, but you didn't win. Like, and to flip that back to the Jokic Embiid thing, last night as well, Embiid had 42 points, 15 rebounds, and they won.
But but like I'm saying, there's something different than player statistics versus player impact. Embiid can impact the game. No, he will impact the game.
I feel like he dominates a game to where he impacts it. Whereas for me, Jokic, when he dominates a game, it's relatively purely statistical.
Okay.
And to go back to your other point as far as Westbrook, this is one of the things I always felt like when Westbrook and Durant were playing together was that whether Westbrook goes 1 for 30 or 15 for 17, you know he's there. Like, if Westbrook has a 30-point game, you know that he's impacting the game, as opposed to because Durant just scores so effortlessly or easy. Like, you look up and it's like he has 30, whether they're up by 15 or down by 15. And that's...
But to me, that is evident of, honestly, player efficiency. If Kevin Durant can subtly score 30, then what can he impactfully score? He can score 60. Embiid is going to... Really, Embiid's presence on the floor is different. I think that's really what it comes down to. Is he's going to make some noise, he's going to make some highlight plays, and he's going to do some unorthodox things. Whereas Jokic is just a little bit more under the radar, under the basket, quiet, subtle output.
Because he's not impacting the game.
But look, I don't know the numbers, but why then evaluate two very different teams?
I'm evaluating the players, in my opinion, because they're both centers.
But how is Embiid winning? Embiid isn't winning the game. Philadelphia is winning the game.
I feel like we know Embiid's winning the game. Ben Simmons isn't shooting the ball. Fultz isn't shooting the ball. We know they're winning that game because Embiid has put the onus on himself to dominate.
Yeah. Oh, he is a dominant. He's the best center in the league. Jokic is not better than Embiid. But impact is a very vague thing to put on a player because it could come from 1,000 different things. Whether or not that was they took one shot at the end of the game and they made it. They won the game, so they made an impact on the game. But they didn't get you to that point.
Right.
And that's what Embiid does. From the start of the game, he's showing his presence and his dominance. Whereas some other guys, Fultz can score 30 or whatever. You really won't think about it. And that's the value of a Joel Embiid, is because even before you go into the game, you have a little bit of an expectation that this guy could dominate. And that make you more reserved or mess up a little bit. So, look, Jokic, I love you, bro.
That's
Jokic
why you picked him in fantasy.
Yeah, Jokic is fired. That's still a very young team as well. So I'm not saying that they'll compete for a championship this year, but I wouldn't want to play them in the playoffs.
I said they've definitely started off the year well, but that Jokic is, yeah.
Hey man, can't all be Joel.
Right, don't compare that ball to me. He can't score.
I gotta check out Jokic's IG, see if he's trolling out there too.
Right, but oh man. Jokic.
Give him some credit, man.
No, I definitely do. I just feel like for the Nuggets to start out their way this year, and then you're quote unquote supposed to be the best player on that team. I need you to have more of an impact. Whether, like I said, because we know he can pass the ball, he rebounds. So it's like it's not necessarily he's just not scoring, but like that definitely says a lot. Yeah. Once again, pace of play. You're telling me the pace of play with today, and you only took one shot. Granted, they're playing Memphis, and so I like I said, I've thoroughly impressed with Memphis. They have a style of play, and they stick to it. And so, Denver, one of the higher scoring teams in the league, to hold them to 87 points is just an amazing statement and testimony to being committed to your system. But at the same time, like, if you're as dominant as a player as we're looking for you to be, you should be able to transcend whatever is, adversity is being placed in front of you as far as concepts or situations. So I
can't look, man. I agree with you 100%. And for a fact, sometimes you just go into a game, you run up to the gym, just not feeling it that day.
Yeah.
So, hey, I hope that doesn't happen over the next couple weeks, bro.
Right. He's scared of Marcus All. We're just gonna say that.
I'm gonna be too. Shoot.
Big guy. All right, that's gonna wrap up our disappointments. When we come back, big news just happened massive news. So we're gonna touch on all of that. So stick around.